All right. Pleasant afternoon, everyone. I am Sandino Soliman, Code NGO Executive Director. Code NGO stands for Focus of Development NGO Networks. I am honored to welcome you all to the Code NGO's Social Development Week 2023. And this is the second session for the 3 days event of a mix of online sessions and a hybrid session on the 18th. With the theme facing the impact of climate change on sustainable development, this year's event aims to highlight positive narrative experiences through initiatives and best practices of national civil society organization alliances, business groups, academe, government, and youth groups on mitigating the impact of climate change affecting particularly food security, health, and economic development. We need to make more informed decisions not only to face the impacts of climate change, but also how to live sustainably. So allow me to introduce the team that supports us and acknowledge them. We have Sheena as our floor manager, Sheena Peña, together with our tech team led by Luigi Alfonso. Sheila Abara is our Facebook Live community manager, while Brian Gonzalez is the documenter for this session. Uh, also, Kat Riodique is here to manage the Zoom. So if you have any concerns, kindly use the chat box for your questions, concerns, and um, clarifications. Now, for this afternoon's eTalk learning session, we shall learn about climate financing anticipatory action, where we understand how organizations mitigate financial risks brought up by climate change. Our speaker for this session is no other than Mr. Vincent Caro, or best known as Arvin from Start Network. So we're glad that Arvin is here. Arvin is an experienced disaster risk reduction and management professional with a decade of expertise in the field. He serves as disaster risk finance coordinator for the Start Network, where he leads the development of a disaster risk financing system. He ensures that there is predictable funding available for anticipatory humanitarian actions. So everyone help me welcome Arvin. Afternoon.
Hi, Dino. Good
Hi.
afternoon.
All right. And thank you for being with us this afternoon. Let's have a fruitful and informative session. Take it away.
Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, I'm Arvin Caro. I'm the um, Country Crisis Financing Advisor of Start Network here in the Philippines. Just wanted to confirm first if my slide is visible on your end. So thumbs up will do. Okay. So yeah, for this afternoon, we'll be talking mainly about climate financing, though not broad in its broadest terms, but we'll zero in terms of anticipatory humanitarian action. When we talk about climate finance, we usually look at it or it refers to the local, national, and transnational financing, which may be drawn from public, private, and alternative sources. Mainly, there are two things. When we look at climate financing, it's either about reducing greenhouse gas emissions or mitigating climate change, and also about adapting to its adverse effects, or uh, the adaptation portion of climate finance. Usually, these are the different climate change interventions. We look at climate technologies, and we're talking about green energy, looking at low carbon, or doing carbon sequestration, carbon trading, or building capacity of the society in terms of research and such. but also one big portion of climate finance, which is in a way medyo hindi gano'n ka taas yung financing currently, is in terms of adaptation or in terms of creating resilience, mainly in terms of disasters, agriculture, health, infrastructure, tourism, and cultural heritage. So in terms of adaptation, this is something that we need to look into. And this is where anticipatory actions would come in. Anticipatory action refers to a set of interventions carried out when a hazard poses imminent danger based on a forecast, early warning, or pre-disaster risk analysis. An individual or organization takes an anticipatory action before anticipated disaster to mitigate its impact on people, assets, and infrastructure that are likely to be affected. Usually, this is how humanitarian or disaster response happens. When there's a severe crisis or there's a crisis that's happening, a typhoon, a flooding, we wait for it to happen. Then from there, we do your damage needs assessment, we do the planning, then we send out appeals, waiting for funds to come in. Then from there, that's when aid is delivered. Usually, this takes maybe 3 weeks to a month before the community who was affected by disasters receive the aid. No? So ganito katagal yung traditional humanitarian um, response, no, when it comes to disasters. What we are trying to do in terms of anticipatory actions is that we change it. We do all of those planning. We do all of the we strengthen the forecasting mechanism. How can we look at possible impacts of a disaster? Then we develop the plan already with the community, understanding what the community would be needing before a disaster hits and what they would be needing even after it hits, and making sure that financing is already there before the disaster happens. So in doing this, we have three main components for an anticipatory action system. The first one is the triggers. The triggers, this is based on when will you be acting? What is your indicator for you to act? Is it when you say it has a signal, a public storm warning signal, or uh, a forecast? Um, and then is it when there are early actions? For a while lang po, saglit lang po. Sorry about that. Yeah, so triggers is mainly based on what could be the impact of a hazard in the localities that we are serving. Second is having a predetermined early action, meaning we have already identified what the interventions are needed for us to provide to the communities that we are serving. So that's the second component. And then third is its financing mechanism. It needs to be automatic. Hindi pwedeng pagka nandiyan na yung bagyo or nandiyan na yung hazard, that's the time that we will be asking for the funds. It needs to be pre-arranged. It needs to be pre-approved. This is how the three components work together. So currently, there's actually already a move at the ASEAN level to have anticipatory action as part of its strategy. So just like to share this with everyone.
ASEAN is bearing the brunt of disasters more than any other regions. With climate change, both extreme and slow onset natural disasters are hitting harder and more often. As these growing threats add to other social, environmental, and economic pressures, innovative solutions to disaster risk management are in high demand, with less focus on responding to and recovering after disasters, and more focus on preventing and mitigating the impacts of climate hazards, as well as protecting lives and livelihoods. As the scale and frequency of climate-related disasters are only set to increase, we must act and move forward together. The ASEAN Agreement on Disaster Management and Emergency Response Work Program for 2021 to 2025 recognizes that integrating anticipatory action is necessary to strengthen disaster risk reduction and management in the region. What does the future of anticipatory action look like at ASEAN? This year, ASEAN developed the Anticipatory Action Framework in Disaster Management, led by the ASEAN Committee on Disaster Management, ACDM, with the support from various sectoral bodies, centers, and partners. The framework defines anticipatory action as a set of interventions that are carried out when a hazard poses imminent danger based on a forecast, early warning, or pre-disaster risk analysis. Anticipatory actions are taken by individuals and organizations before an anticipated disaster to mitigate its impact on people, assets, and infrastructure likely to be affected. Setting up anticipatory action systems and implementation has 3 building blocks at its core. These include 1. Risk information, forecasting, and early warning systems. 2. Planning, operations, and delivery. And 3. Prearranged finance. To translate words into action, the framework further sets out an action plan for 2021 to 2025. This focuses on the alignment of policy, strengthening foundations to enable an environment for anticipatory action, and setting up regional collaboration mechanisms. By adopting the framework, the ASEAN region is committed to protecting and equipping at-risk populations before disaster strikes, minimizing the impacts, protecting livelihoods, and saving lives.
So as mentioned, there's 3 building blocks, or the 3 components. It is the same then. First, having that forecast, having the triggers of when we will be acting. Second is having the plans and operationalizing. What do we do when we act in an anticipatory manner? Lastly is pre-arranged finance, making sure that funds are available and already earmarked for this specific action. So it doesn't need to be requested pa before we act. So this is how anticipatory action works. No? I'd like to share with you also how Start Network is developing this kind of system. First, I'd like to introduce about Start Network. Start Network is a network globally of NGOs. Currently here in the Philippines, we have 15 member agencies. So these are mainly currently international NGOs. But hopefully, I think Code is on its way to becoming a member of it. And for the Philippines to have its hub as well, for the Philippines to and the local NGOs to directly access the resources of Start Network. Start Network mainly has 3 things that we are developing. The first one is in terms of locally led action, ensuring humanitarian at the forefront of humanitarian action are local actors. Second, new forms of financing. So we're developing mainly different financing modalities that would allow faster humanitarian action and collective innovation, having people to be at the center and ensuring we continuously innovate. So at Start Network, we have two main financing instruments that are available. The first one, um, most might have heard already about Start Funds. Start Funds is usually it is released within 72 hours, and it's mainly in terms of unmodeled risks or risks that we are reactive in nature. No, this is where unmodeled risks or start funds comes in terms of response activities. The next one is start ready, which on its side it's more pre-approved funding. So again, in terms of start fund, the main value proposition of start fund is that first, it's working for small to medium scale crises. Second, it could also be used for anticipatory in an anticipatory manner, specifically for hazards that are hard to hard to forecast, but we are able to anticipate because there are seasonal forecasts or there are indigenous practices that we could use to anticipate certain hazards and spikes in chronic humanitarian crises. So here, the main approach here is that everything is done from identifying the hazard to releasing of the funds. It happens within 72 hours, and the entire implementation is within 45 days. This is how Start Fund works. The second one, and where we would be more focused on, is in terms of Start Ready. So for Start Ready, I'd like to share this video.
We are a network of NGOs, and we believe that the global system providing humanitarian aid is no longer working as it should. This is why we are changing the ways humanitarian support is approached and delivered. Start Ready is a new financial service that allows us to shift from responding to people in need to protecting people at risk. It pools risk across different countries and prepositions funding at scale, based on advanced planning, so money can be released rapidly, when and where it's needed most. Here's how it works. Build. Start Network NGOs members in a country or geographic region work together to develop a risk financing strategy for crises that can be predicted. By analyzing risks, developing innovative disaster risk financing models, and agreeing pre-planned activities to mitigate humanitarian impacts. These plans outline what actions will be taken, if pre-agreed thresholds are reached, and what funds would be required to carry them out. Member NGOs can then apply for financial protection from Start Ready, so money is ready for them, should they need it, across the risk season. Fuel. Donors contribute in advance, creating a pool of funds to be managed by the Start Ready Governance Committee. The committee considers all the applications and risks together and then allocates financial coverage to different risks and countries in the most efficient way, with technical advice throughout the decision-making process. Each member involved will then be made aware of the coverage amount that has been allocated for each risk, which can be received if one of the risks in their strategy materializes. Impact. Each funding pool runs for 12 months at a time. During this period, risks are monitored across all countries. If a threshold is breached for a particular risk, then the pre-agreed amount of funding is released immediately to put plans into action. Start Ready is efficient. For the first time, we are able to preposition on earmarked funding and pool risks across countries. This means we can stretch funds and protect more people than if the money is held in each country separately. It's anticipatory. Start Ready prepositions funding for crises that happen with a pattern of recurrence, like floods, droughts, and heat waves, and allows members to act ahead of time to limit their impacts. It also complements the existing STAR funds, and together provides the STAR members with different funding avenues to suit their varied and increasing number of crises that they face. And it's locally led. STAR Ready is governed by a committee with local expertise, in coordination with local NGOs. Contingency plans are developed with at-risk communities as they are best placed to prioritize risks and decide what assistance is needed, where, when, and for whom. Start Ready went live in 2022. In the first 12 months, we pooled funding across 8 countries for 10 climate risks, with funding from 7 donors. And this is just the start. We are continuing to grow Start Ready so that we can protect more and more people from climate risks. For more information on Start Ready and to download the Start Ready Handbook, please visit startnetwork.org.
Okay, so that's mainly about Start Ready, and mainly these 5 things are the things that we are trying to develop in the Philippines, or we have started to develop. First, it's locally led, it's data driven, it's comprehensive, effective and efficient, and it's scalable. Initially, what we have developed in the Philippines is a system, as you've seen in the video, for tropical cyclones. So how did we identify the areas first and foremost? We identified the areas specifically based on the data that we have for the country on looking at its exposure to tropical cyclones, historically, the loss and damage information available for the entire country in terms of tropical cyclones, and then poverty incidents, as well as the humanitarian financial flow. So based on all of these factors, we have identified 3 main provinces wherein Start Ready is operating. So that is in Cagayan, Eastern Samar, and Surigao del Norte. So in these different provinces, we have what we call consortiums as well to implement the Start Ready system. So in Cagayan, it's mainly led by Humanity and Inclusion together with Relief International, Deer Fund, PhilRADS, Green Meadows, and St. Paul University. Then in Eastern Samar, we have 2 consortiums, CARE, LCDE, and Accord for Canavid and Taft Municipality. And then for Borongan and Giwan, it's with Humanity and Inclusion, Save the Children, COPE, and Caritas Borongan. Then Surigao del Norte, for 4 municipalities, is being led by CARE together with AAPC. It's the way we have developed it, as mentioned earlier, how locally led it is. The way we have developed the system of who will be implementing in which area is that those who are applying, for example, in Cagayan, are the ones selecting in Eastern Samar, and then Eastern Samar selecting for Surigao, and Surigao selecting for Cagayan. So this is a peer-to-peer process in terms of selecting who would be the implementing agencies for the different areas. Additionally, if you could see the composition of the consortiums, these are really it was part of the system design that the consortium needs to be majority composed of local NGOs. In a way, even though right now we don't have yet the direct access by local NGOs to Start Network resources, through this approach, we are able to provide the assistance as well to local NGOs for local NGOs to be able to access the resources and be able to be part of the anticipatory action systems. So this is how we are, or where we are developing and who are developing the anticipatory action systems in the different areas. Next is on the risk model that's being used. So currently, what we are using is the 510, the Red Cross 510 impact-based forecast model. So this forecast model, what it does is when there's a tropical cyclone coming, using the meteorological forecast from ECMWF, or the European Meteorological Center, it uses that to calculate how many houses is predicted to be damaged in each area. But for Start Network, we wanted it to be more more understandable in terms of the people affected. So we are calculating it to the number of people affected. So this model, this impact-based forecast model, is the basis of how the system will be activating, on how it would be triggering. So what is the trigger mechanism, as we've seen in the different components or the different building blocks of an anticipatory action system? So this might be a bit complex. The trigger mechanism for Start Network is looking at different scenarios or different severities that could happen when there is a tropical cyclone. So if you are seeing here, we have mainly three scenarios: the moderate, the high, and the very high scenario. So maybe to distinguish what is a moderate to a very high, a moderate would be possibly around the the event or the impact of, say, Typhoon Ursula back in 2019, and then Typhoon Haiyan would be a very high scenario. So that's in a way how we are developing these trigger mechanisms for the anticipatory action system. Another idea here as well is that the problem or the issue that we are also looking at in the Philippines is because of what we call rapid intensification. Cyclones within a span of 24 hours or even less jumps from a category 2 cyclone to a category 4 or category 5 cyclone. So this actually makes it harder or more makes the system more complex. So in our trigger mechanism, this allows the system to still be activated in a response capacity compared to just an anticipatory action. So this is how the triggers are developed and how the risk model is developed. Now we go to the plans, so that you could look into how the two are working together, how the plans are working with the trigger mechanism. So next is how we're planning. We're developing these plans in a continuum. Usually when we say a contingency plan, we're usually looking at a snapshot in time, mainly looking at worst case scenarios, looking at worst case scenarios after a cyclone or a disaster happens. This is mainly how contingency plans are developed. But for the Start Network system, what we're trying to do is not only looking at the response activities, but also looking into early action or 72 hours before impact. So from there, 72 hours before the cyclone reaches land, or not really a landfall, no, but yung nearest niya to land, meaning its nearest impact point is 72 hours before its impact, we are able to provide assistance already to the community so that we could also protect developmental gains in the communities. But also looking into early response activities. Kasi usually when we do humanitarian action, or sometimes there's a point that instead of us being able to, as we've seen earlier, now, instead of us being able to provide resources to the community, we're still doing assessments, doing damage and needs assessments, and then just from that time, then we do the requesting of funds, doing appeals and such. But with this development of the plan, we are able to already respond because we already know what the community needs. In a way, we are able to provide the immediate needs of the community based on the initial information that we have identified in crafting the early actions or the anticipatory actions. Next is that these are localized interventions and approaches, mainly the how we have developed the contingency plans. This is really the local NGOs working together with the community to understand what the community needs and how the community would be working in terms, or how can we protect the community better, not only for them to evacuate, but to provide resources that would help the community not suffer during a cyclone, for example. So these are really interventions that have been identified by the communities themselves together with the local NGOs and the consortiums in the different areas. So we have we already identified the trigger and the forecasting system or risk model. Second, we have also identified the plans or the how it's operationalized. Lastly is in terms of financing. As mentioned earlier, the Start Network financing or Start Ready is financed through a risk pool. So what is this risk pool? So for example, here, usually kasi what we have is when there are funds, we just earmark funds for each country or for each hazard. No, with that, we could only fund based on the total amount of fund that we have. No, say I have 5 pesos. I give 1 to person A. I give 1 to person B. I give 2 to person C. I give 1 to person D. No, so automatically ganun lang yung amount na meron na pwedeng i-share between those persons because we have earmarked a fund to those persons. No? But with the Start Ready system, it's being pooled. Not only the funds are pooled, but also the return periods of each hazard are pooled. Meaning, there's a chance that these hazards will not happen or the impact is not going to happen in the areas that was identified or the countries that was identified. So with that, we are able to save or expand or stretch the funding to other areas that would be really impacted by the hazard. So ang isang example ko nito nung concept of risk pooling is have you experienced when the airlines would say we're overbooked, so baka merong volunteer to ride the next plane, no? So that's actually an example of the risk pool. Overbooking in the plane is mainly looking at the possibility of other passengers not coming and riding the plane. So that's how risk pool comes into play, that other hazards will not happen. So this is how we are able to stretch the financing for Start Ready. So in Start Ready has 3 main funds. The first one is the trigger fund, or as earlier mentioned, the fuel fund. This is really where it is pre-approved and pre-agreed and pre-contracted, so that once we reach the triggers, automatically we are able to respond and provide anticipatory actions to the communities. This is the trigger fund for pre-approved early action and response, and can only be accessed for the risk model. Another portion of this is the National Reserve, which is can be accessed by in-country, really looking into preparedness activities such as stockpiling, beneficiary targeting, simulation exercises. And this is very, very important because having an anticipatory action system, or for example, having the understanding of the triggers, is not only for the implementing agencies, but also for the community to understand it. So it's very important that we have preparedness activities in place for this. And then lastly is the basis risk pool, which is mainly for this is a fund mainly looking into if the system or the risk model misfires, or it doesn't really look into what's actually happening. Lastly, just looking into how the system is governed. While Start Network is an international organization, all of the decisions are made in country. So how we have decided who would be implementing in each area, how we activate the system, when we activate the system, all of these are decided locally. So this is decided mainly by these groups of people. We have members from Start Network. Start Network members, there are 4 seats in the local governance team, followed by local NGO members, 4 as well, and then lastly, a local foreign expert, or some a person from the academe or with the technical expertise to provide assistance in the governance team, mainly making really our system led by local actors, not only local NGOs or local CSOs, but also local experts as part of the local actors in country. So how does this actually work? The system actually activated last July during Typhoon Egay. So if you remember, Typhoon Egay actually became a super typhoon, no? It was projected to be a super typhoon last July, and it made its landfall in Apari July 26. That's where the impact is, and mostly in Cagayan. So as mentioned earlier, Cagayan is part of the areas that we have already identified for this system. So this is how it was activated. It started in July 18, when the low pressure area was developing, and it entered the Philippine Area of Responsibility. And by July 21, it intensified to a typhoon. And this is when we have received initial forecasts from the 510 model. Then in July 23, we have met the triggers. So if you remember earlier, yung trigger system natin, we have met those triggers and we have approved the activation of the system. So right then and there, we have already mobilized the resources. So by July 24, the partners in Cagayan, led by Humanity and Inclusion, were able to distribute cash assistance to 252 households that they were able to use for them to have food provisions, medicine. So this allowed communities to prepare and not really wait for the typhoon before they have something for themselves. No? So this allowed that. And then by July 25, the system further or Typhoon Egay further intensified, no, because of rapid intensification. So from there, it rapidly intensified, and the local governance team have decided that we would be activating the system further for early response activities or the response activities, and that allowed us to have the funds for early response because of a very high scenario when it became a super typhoon. So its impact is around July 26, and we just waited for the time to be safe, for the partners to be safe on the ground. That's the time that we did the additional response activities in terms of cash grants, wash assistance, and assistive assets, and conduct of awareness sessions, especially in terms of protection. This was conducted from August 1 to September 14 by the same consortium in Cagayan. So just on how the triggers work, this is how it looks like. So in July 23, we were able to see Cagayan for 58% with the predicted probability at 59K and 62K. So this is that point now. So this allowed us to activate the system basically. When we activated the system, we released the initial funding wherein the cash assistance was given in an anticipatory manner. And then July 25, it further intensified. So we further activated the system because of a very high scenario, which is 62K at 75%. So it's looking at this portion. So it allowed us to further activate the system to a very high scenario. So this is how an anticipatory system, anticipatory action system works. And we are looking into possibly this could help in adopting climate risks, climate impacts as we move along in creating more innovative solutions for humanitarian actions. So I think that's it from my end. Thank you very much. Are there questions or, back to you.
Thank you very much, Arvin. Wow. That was a very complete and comprehensive presentation of the Start Ready funds and the Start. We covered the Start network also, and then you introduced us to the concepts of climate finance. Yeah, and buti po nabanggit mo yung yung Philippine hubs. So together with the Start Network, yung Food NGO and its members, and also the humanitarian actors and NGOs outside of the Food NGO networks are working together to build this Philippine hub that can coordinate the anticipatory actions modeled after the Start Network as presented by Arvin today. Okay, so for people here in the Zoom, you can send in your questions via chat. And before we begin pala, Arvin, you want to add something?
Yeah, I think, well, mainly, as I always mention, anticipatory action is not a silver bullet. It will not cure climate change, but this is one way that we could help in terms of adapting to the impacts of climate risks.
Thank you, Arvin. And earlier this morning, habang naghihintay po tayo ng mga questions sa Facebook saka sa Zoom. By the way, we're also on Facebook Live right now. So welcome po sa ating mga viewers. While waiting for that, earlier this morning, we featured yung youth in climate action naman. And then we were talking about yung kanilang ways of addressing risks sa climate change. So one group was yung yakap. They were they are involved in a lot of outreach activities to explain yung mga risks ng climate change, and then sounding the climate emergency alarm. Yan. So and then the other group was advocating for the rights of nature bill naman. So there's a idea that nature has rights also, so it can be also a legal personality. And then one of the questions there, kasi they were talking also about how to mitigate risks of climate change daw. Yung causes ng climate change daw, some of them point to yung private sector or businesses ganyan sa economy, for economic development. And then specific question was that may collaborative efforts naman, or parang hindi pala yung question. Ang question ay meron ba, are there collaborative efforts, both the government and private sector, responsive to climate change causing disasters among nations? So siguro yun muna yung isang tanong that we can explore while we collect yung mga iba pang questions that are coming in.
Sure. Well, I think in terms of financing, climate finance itself, no? Well, yun yung binabanggit ko kanina. In terms of climate finance, malaki actually yung climate finance in terms of mitigation. Actually, nandun yung bulk ng financing. If we are to look at it, supposedly nasa 100 billion, I think, yung financing supposedly for adaptation. Because we're at this junction already that we need to look into. Yes, we need to slow down the impacts of climate change, definitely. But we also need to look into how do we adapt from here on, and that's where financing needs to come in. I think in terms of private sector and the government working together currently, mainly in terms of carbon trading. That's one. Second would be looking into meron ding what we call debt for nature swaps. So that's our one of the climate financing strategies. For adaptation, most of that I've seen from the private sector are looking into, though not as big pa siguro, no, but looking into nature-based solutions. This is where mainly adaptation comes in, and yun yung una nating nakikita in terms of adaptation for climate finance. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Arvin. So let's read some of the questions that came in sa Zoom now. From Art Godoy of City Anti-Drug Abuse Council, or CADAC. Ang tanong niya, is loss and damage funding required on every LGU? Would you know?
Ito po baka pwede nating i-explain further, kasi loss and damage funding is something that's being is part of the last COP in terms of creating a loss and damage funds, and I think by this year, hopefully may release na ang COP in terms of how loss and damage funds will be developed talaga. How much is it, and how it would be accessed by different countries. At the LGU level, I'm not sure if are we talking about LGU to come up with loss and damage funding, or medyo yun yung hindi ganun ka-clear sa akin in terms of the question.
Sige po, balikan natin yung question later. Meron pang isang question na pumasok. To clarify further, yung COP is yung Conference of Parties that that happens at the global level.
Yes,
There
yes.
there will be one in
In
November.
November,
December. Yeah,
December. Yeah.
yeah. That Arvin is mentioning that will hopefully get some clear guidelines on how that loss
Yeah.
and damage fund that is now being pulled in will be implemented. Ano yan, parang country level yan na implementation.
Yeah.
Yon. So another one from Sir June Salcados of the Central Visayas Network. He said, "Thank you for explaining to us Start Network. You mentioned about pre and post financing as part of the preparation and humanitarian aid for disaster affected communities. Do you also involve in financing for rebuilding livelihood and reconstruction of affected communities?"
Start Network currently is not directly involved in terms of um, recovery, basically. This is more in terms of disaster recovery. And what we are looking at really in terms of these two financing mechanisms that we currently have is in terms of disaster response and anticipatory action. Because, and one we are really highlighting is the anticipatory action, because we're looking at anticipatory action to help us not lose developmental gains. No? Lalo na in terms of the work that for example, the network of code is doing in terms of development actions. We don't want to lose those developmental gains, and we're looking at anticipatory action to help us not lose those developmental gains. And if we are still focusing the funds for recovery and reconstruction, or disaster recovery, then mainly what we're looking at is that it's lesser yung dapat maging lesser yung recovery and reconstruction natin, because we are trying to protect developmental gains.
Okay, thank you, Arvin. So basically for Start Network, it's about yung what happens before or during
Yes,
an event. No? Yung event event means yung actual disaster that will happen, and the disasters that are happening at this point are really caused by the effects of climate change. So yun yung connection doon.
Yeah.
But clearly it's not really focused on the reconstruction or the post disaster. Hindi
Yeah.
siya doon focused on. I would venture to say na actually mandate na rin yan ng government to di ba, to have that reconstruction strategy after the disasters. Ayan. So then the next question ay ito na. Babasahin ko na to from the chat now. Ulit kay June Salgados. How do you measure the anticipatory action versus loss reduction in terms of its impact?
Yan yung isang pinakamagandang question. And globally, this is one thing that we are working on, kasi there's still a lot of questions how we activate the different anticipatory actions, and hindi pa ganun karami yung nagiging activation, and the evidence base are still thin in a way. So we're still looking into, currently we're looking into that, on how can we actually measure it. But what we are looking into, and this might come in terms of the evaluation, the impact evaluation of the last activation of Start Ready. Kasi we were able to do activation or provide interventions in an anticipatory manner lang. May beneficiaries na anticipatory action lang yung na-receive. May beneficiaries na response lang yung na-receive. May beneficiaries na pareho yung na-receive. So we could look into how those different beneficiaries have sustained or ano yung loss reduction nga ba na nagawa ng anticipatory action. Medyo mahirap at tricky siyang sagutin yung how do we really measure it kasi nga hindi siya nangyari eh. So paano mo ngayon i-measure yon? So this is something that we are looking into, and hopefully in the next few months we have that impact evaluation, and we could share it with you as well.
Thank you, Arvin. So ako curious ako dun sa nabanggit mo. Impact evaluation at the Philippines country level
Yes,
or
during the last activation for Super Typhoon Egay. No? So yung
sige.
actual activation natin, the actual resources that were given or interventions that were implemented, we'll look into and evaluate how did it really help. No? What's its impact to the community?
Okay. Sige. Actually, I'd like to touch on to that kasi may nagtatanong, may nag-chat sa akin na ang tanong niya ay there were mentions of humanitarian action being more locally led. Can you share some more examples of it here in the Philippines with emphasis in the anticipatory action being played by communities? Pero ako familiar ako dun sa activation na nangyari. So baka pwedeng isa yon sa mga examples na pwede mo makwentuhan kami a bit. And then ano yung parang ako yung isa kang clarification din. Pagka sinabing anticipatory action, does that mean is it cash yung ibibigay para dun sa communities or may iba pang forms of anticipatory action?
Sure. Doon muna tayo sa kung cash lang ba siya. So if it's just cash, no, not really. It's not directly na it's just cash. One, cash, it's making a big portion of it kasi it's the easiest way for us to also provide intervention, and it's very, very flexible for the community or the people. No, it can be used for someone na doon sa bahay ko ngayon, hindi ako safe. Pero may kamag-anak ako sa 2 towns away na pwede ako maging safe. Kaso lang, wala akong pamasahe. So you provide cash, they could use it to actually evacuate to a better place, no? And not for them to be part doon sa loob ng evacuation center. And we know the situations in the evacuation center, no? Or it could be used for one example of how localized it is also. I think nakita ko ang pangalan ni Miss Agnes ka dito eh. So from the experience of AADC in Surigao del Norte, because they're the ones implementing it, it's still in cash, but they've seen one practice in one of the towns in Surigao del Norte, wherein they said kahit when there's may bagyo, pag may bagyo, mas gusto ng fisher folks pumalaot kasi merong mga high value na fish, no? So that's one thing that they were observing, no? But so sa kanila, when you give them cash, first it's for the income replacement. That's the first one. But also second, which is very, very local, is they would be using it to look at to hire people to help them sink their boats. It's boat sinking. Bakit nila parang kakaiba no? Papalubugin nila yung mga bangka nila. Apparently because in their area it is a mangrove area. So kung yung bangka nila ay nasa hindi nila maiakyat. Kasi nga puro mangroves eh. So hindi mo maiakyat basta-basta sa inland, no? Yung mga bangka. So kung hayaan mo siya doon at bumagyo yung mga bangka maano lang sa mangrove, so masira. So what they do, nilulubog nila yung mga bangka so that yung waves nandun lang sa taas ng mga bangka. It's very, 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 very local. Yun yung isang, that's an experience from Miss Agnes actually, ng AADC. And they are the ones who really discussed this with the community, and the community mentioned about this. In Cagayan, it's mainly cash that they did during the last activation. It was as mentioned by the community. Kasi you would be able to see, to ask the community and even the LGU, when do you start providing resources? Pagkatapos na po ng bagyo. Kung kailan ka nagpapa-evacuate ka 2 days before. 2 days silang walang kain, 3 days na walang kain kasi wala naman silang income during that time. So it allows them to have that level of their dignity also in their when they do evacuate to the evacuation center. The LGU doesn't need to think about it kasi, or they themselves may dala sila pagpunta nila.
All right. So, very interesting yung kwento mo about sa ngayon ko lang narinig yun na ilulubog nila yung barko. Pero apparently that works for them. No?
Yeah.
Ayan talaga yung, so nasa parang ano nila yan, what do they call that? What do you call that? Contingency plan.
Yes, part of their
Yeah.
contingency plan, yes.
Na that's one of the things that they will do.
Yeah.
And then yan, yung contingency plan ay ano talaga, parang that's one example of the locally led. No? They really
Yes.
consulted the locals there to create that contingency plan. Yeah. Thank you, Arvin. So another question na chinat sa akin, do we need specific policy reforms from government to facilitate or institutionalize these kinds of funds or anticipatory action frameworks?
Yes, that's one of the things that we are working on as well. Because currently, the DRM fund is not allowed to be used in an anticipatory manner. Yung pinaka-main na pwede natin gamitin sa kanya for preparedness, ganyan. Pero yung aid given before impact, yan yung isang bagay na hindi pa available. So what we're doing together with the National Technical Working Group on Anticipatory Action, what we're really doing is to look into crafting actually a law or other policy measures that would allow anticipatory actions. So this is being worked on at the national level, and we're actually drafting a bill already that we're just waiting from the council so that we could share it with the Congress. Yeah, but we have also already champions. No, we have started lobbying for champions for anticipatory action in the Congress.
Oh, that's good to know. Yan, sige. Baka we can talk again about this kasi we're also looking into policy advocacy din kasi, and yan, maybe this is one of the things that we can work together on. Yeah. Okay. And thank you for that. The next question ay donor behavior is usually reactive. Not everyone will want to donate for a disaster strikes. So how does this happen? Do we inspire them to do pre-financing or what? Yeah.
Siguro ngayon, if we look at donors, for example, locally, medyo hindi pa siya nakikita, but it is starting. And usually, this donor behavior or yung mindset ng donors, it starts at the global level. And the good thing is that we have champions. We have the German government, we have the British government, we have the European government starting as well to look into it. Actually, I think a large portion of the German government's aid is actually geared towards anticipatory action. Malaki na yung malaki yung changes during the last global platform on disaster risk reduction last year in Bali. anticipatory action was sort of the talk of the town. And everyone and the donors have started to look into how they would be financing it. And the way we would be really changing the landscape is for us to develop this different pilots that we're conducting and generate evidence so that they'll see how important or impactful anticipatory actions can be.
Okay. So, thank you, Arvin. Ano? I'll just read the comment here in the chat para sa ating mga Facebook Live viewers. Sabi ni Ferdinand Bello, yes, in my experience, mostly in the province, anticipatory action, no cash, or actually, the province has no anticipatory action involved, or their move is too ready for evacuation. Wala pang pagkain. Bahay ka pagkatapos ng bagyo, pahirapan pa sa relief goods. Yan. So, yan ang sharing ng experience niya ni Ferdinand Bello. Sige. Okay. So, if I think we covered a lot of ground for this afternoon. Yeah. So, any concluding remarks from your end, Arvin?
Yeah, I think it's all just one thing that we as a sector, as a nonprofit and the development workers also look into. Anticipatory actions is not just here for the humanitarian sphere or the but also in terms of development, because we want to protect developmental gains. Ayaw naman natin, we're working our bones to do development work, but we every time that there's a disaster, it gets washed away. So this is where the development and humanitarian nexus works together as well. So this is something that we need to look into, but also it's not a silver bullet. We need to work together in terms of the climate risks, finding innovative solutions.
Thank you very much, Arvin. So, please give a Zoom clap or round of applause to our very powerful resource speaker, si Carl, Carl Elvin ka pala. Arvin Caro.
Arvin lang, Arvin.
Yeah. So, ayan, we have a certificate of appreciation for you. This awards it to Carl Vincent Caro of Start Network for the great contribution of knowledge during the eTalk Climate Financing Anticipatory Action, co-organized by Caucus of Development NGO Networks. All right. So just some highlights now before we cap the session of the discussion earlier. So climate finance refers to local, national, or transnational financing from public or government, private, and alternative sources to address greenhouse gas emissions and enable adaptation to the adverse effects of climate change. Anticipatory action challenges traditional humanitarian responses by ensuring that funds are available before a crisis starts. In fact, the ASEAN recognizes the necessity of integrating anticipatory action and establishing AA, as it's called, systems to strengthening disaster management across the region. Today, the world is entering a new era of humanitarian action, led by the groups like Start Network, one that focuses on locally led action, new forms of financing, and collective innovation. Local NGOs and other community-level actors play a crucial role in facilitating climate finance and anticipatory action in response to crises. So, again, thank you, Arvin, and hope to have you again in future events of Code NGO.
Sure,
Okay.
will do.
All right. Now, before we end this afternoon session, may we request all the participants to fill out the evaluation form. So this will be sent to you in the chat box by Kat. So you can also copy and save the link if you are not able to answer it today. This will also be sent to you by email. The presentation of Arvin will also be shared if to us, no? And also, we'd like to we also like to invite you to the public forum hybrid learning session. And so actually this day was a bang, and we have more in store for you in the next few days. So inviting everyone to this year's hybrid public forum and learning sessions on October 18th. This will be a series of presentations from a panel of experts from various sectors in the morning, and in the afternoon, there will be simultaneous learning sessions that will cover topics viewed in deeper perspective. To register, just click on the link that will be posted later. We look forward to everyone's participation. It was indeed a productive and insightful session. May these sessions force be with you in keeping yourself and people around you informed about the impacts of climate change, and proves how essential our role is in fighting for and protecting for our planet. So Arvin, I hope you're still here para makapag-picture tayo ngayon. Dahil mga Pinoy tayo, so I invite everyone to turn on their cameras if you can for a group photo. Yung mga nandito pa.
All right, so I'll take the photo. We have two screens. Everyone, please flash your brightest smile in 3, 2, 1. And then next frame, last frame na po. Hold your smiles in 3, 2, 1. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you everyone, and ingat po kayo.
Kung ating susuriin at masusing titingnan, maraming problema ng bayan nagkaroon ng kalutasan. Maraming hinaing na bigyang katugunan dahil may nagkusang makialam sa pag-unlad ng bayan.
Magugulat ka, di naman sila naiiba. Baka nakakilala mo pa